Jon Stewart, Dave Chappelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, firstly, what is it like doing a comedy in here in the Albert Hall? Have you ever been in such a hall?
I don't know if there is such a hall.
No, I don't think there is. It was very royal. You felt wrapped in velvet.
So what brings you two together? I know you've done things together before, but why now, why here?
Well, it started when I was doing a residency at Radio City. And part of the residency, I would have, different comedians and musicians would all come. It was kind of like a great collective or curation of talent. And this particular night, it was the day that riot happened in Charlottesville.
Oh, yeah.
And, you could feel it in the room. There were palpable feelings around it. And Jon Stewart showed up that night. And when he went on, really, like, either John or Obama are the only people that would have got. Literally, you're the only ones that would have got that
Obama's
reception.
got a tight 5 on Charlottesville that would have crushed.
No, you could feel the crowd like it was a sigh of relief. You were like a visual cue to be rational and the set you did that day was so powerful.
Well, that opens up a lot of questions. First and foremost, I was just reading about Lenny Bruce, the great comedian. Right. I think it's 50 years since he died, but all of a sudden having a resurgence. Off-Broadway play about to happen. He features in an Amazon Prime series. But
Lenny Bruce.
His career's going better now.
Yeah, his career's going better now. He's having a revival.
He changed agents.
But people are saying that, the same things that he was satirizing and making, part of his comedy back then exist right now. The assault on free speech, the partitioning of the country along race and religious lines, right. The protest on the streets and in Congress, and I wonder whether that affects you. I mean, whether you internalize that, given what you just said about a rational voice.
Well, I don't know about a rational voice, but I think we always internalize what's around us. We're comedians, and I think we feed off of whatever the food is of the day that's coming around. I don't know that, in terms of a resurgence of the country being divided along racial and class lines and gender lines and all that, I feel like that's always with us. It's just at times it's maybe bubbles up more explicitly, but even when you don't say it out loud, it still exists. And it's always, foundational. And so I don't know that it ever goes away.
Do you think it is more acute right now?
The division?
Yeah.
No, man, no. In fact, some of the things they say, even when they say that Russia influenced the election, it's kind of like, is Russia making us racist? Is that who's doing it? Oh, okay, I thought it was. Oh my God, thank goodness I thought it was us.
Putin was like, you should be racist.
Huh? I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, if they kill the country that way, then we're the murder weapon.
Yeah.
So
we've always been.
Is the Trump era a good era for comedians? Is it just unbelievable fodder or not?
I would not even name the era after him.
Yeah.
He's getting too much credit.
Well, he's the president?
He's not making the wave, he's surfing it.
Yeah.
They were
the energy's always been there.
All he does is sing those people's greatest hits. Build a Wall, all these things we've heard before. He just sings all the songs. He's the only one that has been brash enough to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a lot more aggressive towards journalists and reporters. I wonder what you think. I mean, obviously we're speaking in a moment when, one of our colleagues has been butchered in cold blood.
Right.
In a consulate.
In Saudi. Sure.
In Turkey.
That's terrifying.
And in that environment, President Trump talks about a candidate running for office who has body slammed a reporter. And I'm going to play a little bit of what he said.
Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my kind of... He's my guy.
What do you make of that? Because I ask you, because you were sort of the graybeard of journalism almost.
What?
I know you hate that, but when anchors started to be less authoritative than they used to be maybe, 20 years ago,
well,
you were, for better or for worse, considered somebody with authority every night.
I think we were the protest vote to a large extent. We were none of the above. So people would say, who's the most trusted news anchor? And they would list the 4 network anchors, and then they would throw in, my name, none of the above, and everybody's like, none of the above. And they would circle it, and that would go there. You know, I think that he is a performer. When we do our shows, we do our shows. And no matter if we're sitting in Royal Albert Hall or like when we were in Copenhagen, when we went to this little room called the Zoo, there was, you know, 100 Danish-speaking, somewhat surprised people to see us. And we sat there and we did our show, and we did it for 20. Donald Trump is a salesman who changes his pitch depending on who he's in front of. What he doesn't realize is it's all being recorded. And so his pitch to that audience is the us versus them. We're all the victims of this liberal media, of these soft journalists who come out here and lie about us. We're really great people. And that's what he pitches to them. And if you ask him about it and you say, do you think that's okay to body slam a reporter? No, 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 of course not. That's, you know, not do that. But I was joking. It was a little joke I was making in front of friends.
Before we go forward, let's go back to the day after the election. You were hosting Saturday Night Live right after the election.
I'm wishing Donald Trump luck, and I'm going to give him a chance. And we, the historically disenfranchised, demand that he give us one too. Thank you very much.
Did that dream, desire come true? Has he given you a chance? Or you still want to give him a chance?
I think I said the right thing at the right time. You know what I mean? I think that we had to recalibrate and kind of put things in perspective. You know, I'm a black American, so these feelings that people felt right after the election, we felt that many elections, many elections consecutively, and I think that to some degree people overreacted. Like, the alternative to giving him a chance was storming the streets, and if something good's on television, I'm not doing that. I just feel like
HBO has a lot of offerings right now to
right.
keep you from storming.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is on.
That's what I'm saying.
I can't make the ride tonight. But I don't know. Is he doing a good job? Am I happy with what he's doing? No, it's been very difficult to watch the last couple of years.
Harder than I think I thought it would be, in that there was a part of me that thought when you get in that room and it's nighttime and there's no one around and Teddy Roosevelt and Abe Lincoln and everybody's up on the walls and they're staring at you, that brings a certain cognitive weight to what you're feeling. And I imagine he walked in that room, he's like, take that down, put up dogs playing poker. Can a fella get some French fries around here? You know, I think that oddly enough, he transformed the White House, and the White House wasn't able to transform him.
Back in 2015, when he announced for president, you didn't take it entirely seriously.
The man came down an escalator.
Can I just play what you said?
Oh, sure.
Like many of you, I heard some interesting, let's call it news today, about a certain, let's say, gift from heaven, entering the presidential race, because apparently Huckabee Santorum wasn't far-fetched enough. I gotta tell you, the world right now is like, whites are black, Trump's running for president, like.
Should you have taken him more seriously? I mean, you were the oracle, John.
Yeah, now. I didn't think, I thought America was gonna go, is that an escalator in a mall? I'm not gonna vote for that dude. Like, I didn't think he meant it. And when he gave that speech, quite frankly, I really thought when he said, you know, Mexico sends us their worst, the rapists and murderers, I really thought he had disqualified himself.
Not to mention what he said about women.
About women, about everything that he said there. And I thought, this is disqualifying. For me, though, and clearly I don't speak for, you know, he's been very effective at, like what Dave said, surfing the waves that have been there. I'm watching the midterms. Man, you would think our country is Mad Max Thunderdome. This guy is like, they're coming from Guatemala, they're coming from Mexico, there's a liberal mob that's coming, Muslims. And you would think everybody in the country is just like, to the bunker, to the ramparts.
To that point, it's been written about you, Dave, that
It has been written.
it has been said that you have a singular gift for blurring left and right, red and blue states. What do you think that means? That somehow you're able to sort of surf, bring them together, not necessarily get stuck in the political divide?
Because most of the political discussion is so binary, and I'm way more interesting than that. It's just a dude. It's
So you're way more interested in that.
yeah, most people are.
Most people are.
If you talk to them, you know, I hear people say, you know, families are not speaking to one another because of politics. That sounds insane to me. Like, there's a ton of people that I love and respect that I completely disagree with.
So do you think, because obviously we're all caught up in this sort of daily Trump fest. I mean, every single newspaper, every radio station, every bit of social media.
You got to make money too.
Well, it's
You got-
dissecting.
You got bills to pay, man. You got electric bills. You got food. You know, this guy he's giving you all cash. The cash flow in the Trump era for these TV stations and for these news stations.
Can I say that might have been an issue, and
Yeah.
maybe it still is an issue for the people who are the bean counters, but we,
Yeah.
the journalists, we, I think, believe that our job is to navigate the truth and to do the fact checking and all the rest of it. So I think that's what motivates
But
a
I
lot
think
of
the
people.
journalists have taken it personally.
Okay,
They're
that's interesting.
personally wounded and offended by this man. He baits them, and they dive in. And what he's done well, I thought, is appeal to their own narcissism, to their own ego. Because what he says is, these are and the journalists stand up and say, we are noble, we are honorable, how dare you, sir? And they take it personally. And now he's changed the conversation to not that his policies are silly or not working or any of those other things. It's all about the fight. He's able to tune out everything else and get people just focused on the fight. He's going to win that fight.
You know, even Bob Woodward said that in his book on the Trump White House that a lot of journalists are too emotional about this. But it's hard for us to be dispassionate when words from the White House are aggressive against us and you know, raise the specter
But you're
of
not
violence
used to it.
against
Think
us.
of the communities.
No, we're used to it, believe me.
But think of the communities
We've been
of
out there
color.
in the field.
Think of Muslims. Think of the black community. People, you know, when journalists rise to this outrage of how dare you say this about us, think of the lives that they've been leading under this and
All right.
what they've been put under.
So you have said artists can transcend race like nobody can.
True.
So tell me about that. Tell me how you do that and why you do it in a way that others can't.
I mean, even if you look like in the early days of bebop and jazz, like the bandstand was integrated decades before the country was. The artists, we're looking at, art is such a beautiful thing to look at that one can forget certain lines that one should not transgress socially. In the pursuit of art, if someone's good at something, you want to be with that person. No matter what color, race, gender, if they got the gift, they got the gift. Art transcends everything.
Hopefully it articulates something human, not something purely sectarian.
And comedy, Steve Martin said this, and others have said it, and you've said in a different way.
You got a good research
Yeah,
department. man.
yeah,
She's just
yeah.
pulling stuff up quotes. I don't know
Comedy,
any of this stuff.
comedy
Yeah.
is not always nice. It can be really mean, and it can push boundaries to a place where some people feel really offended. Is that because everybody's a snowflake, or should comedy have certain boundaries at all?
Well, I think they're somewhat separate questions.
Are they?
Comedy's boundaries should be excellence. So whatever it is that you're talking about in terms of subject matter, if you're just napalming, you know, indiscriminately to provoke, then to me that's not really comedy. Comedy should be something more human and truly believed. And but I don't put any line on it. And I'm always fascinated when they say, you know, where do comedians draw the line? But nobody ever goes and says to Donald Trump, where do presidents draw the line? What, you know, we add insult sometimes to injury, but
Horseface, I think he should draw the
Horseface.
line at horseface.
right. But when you talk about
Which,
that,
as we know, is what he called Stormy Daniels.
That's right.
Yeah.
but I'm less interested in his insults and more interested in his injuries, in the people that are being hurt. Not the people that are being insulted, but are being hurt.
I was going to ask you about Louis C.K.
Okay.
Because obviously everybody's talking about it, you know, and
Not about
what-
everybody.
Well, a lot of people.
All right, because my mom hasn't mentioned it.
Has she never?
She's never
She's
mentioned
never
it.
said,
She never
John,
said,
would you ever
John,
have done that?
Is Louis C.K. going to go back on stage? She's thinking about other things.
Well, you've said that that comedy is not particularly a very friendly place for women in
It
context.
has not been, no.
Do you
I
think
think
that
that's
might
right.
change?
Well, hopefully it changes
Okay, no,
in
the
all
the
atmospheres.
better question is why is it not friendly for women?
Boy, that's a good question. The roots of it, I don't know. I mean, I think it started out as a male-dominated field. It's not a particularly welcoming field. You sort of have to come out there and cut your teeth on it. I think in general, most things are not. I'll tell you a story. So we had on the Daily Show, there was an article about us, said, it was a sexist environment. We didn't have women writers. And I got very offended by that. I was very mad. I was like, you saying I'm not I was raised by a single mother. She wore a T-shirt that said, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And me and my brother were like, I think we might be men. This is terrible. So I was mad. How can they say such a thing? And I went back to the writer's room and I was like, you believe this, Steve? What do you think, Greg, Dave, Tom, Mike? And then I was like, ooh. And it was right. But the reason it was right was not necessarily one that we had seen before. Our ignorance to it was such that, so we had put in a system of getting writers where there were no names on it. We thought that's colorblind, gender blind, etc. But what you don't realize is the system itself, the tributaries that feed us those submissions, is polluted as well. So all we're getting are white males who'd been to Ivy League colleges and wrote for the Lampoon, or funny Jewish guys from Brown. And so what you had to say then is, send me not that. Send me your women, send me people of color. And then we would get the submissions and go, I can't believe how funny women have gotten just recently.
Right.
But do you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. Yeah.
It's a systemic issue. And I think what can mostly help change is when you open up new tributaries to bring in talent, and then they grow, and then they help grow their community
100%.
and tell their stories. And that's the most important
100%.
part.
Can I just move from gender to race then? Because obviously there have been very, very, very funny black comedians, African-American comedians. And I read also that, obviously Bill Cosby was a hero to many in the black and white community, frankly. And I think he was at one point a hero to you.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. If he was your hero, how difficult was it? How hard was it for you to get to grips with the transgressions against women?
It's a nightmare to see a hero fall that heinously. Like literally, I talked about it on one of my specials, and someone said I was defending him, and I was like, defending him? I was mourning, like the loss of a hero. It's a terrible thing. It was a terrible, terrible thing to watch. I got to tell you, seeing him get perp walked at 81 was devastating for every black comedian. Everybody is like, oh my God, this is terrible. I joked about it before where I say, all my heroes was either murdered by the government or registered sex offenders. It's a sad state of affairs.
So then what is the right way for anybody to rehabilitate themselves? Louis C.K., who I started to talk about, did what he did, without consent of the women who he did it in front of. And then he pops into the Comedy Cellar in the Village, and he does this act, again, without consent of the audience. They didn't know he was going to be there. But be that as it may, what is the
That's why I always get consent of the audience. I go around and I make sure that everybody's on.
You guys cool with me going on right
Cool,
now?
right? I'm going to go on. I'm going to do like 15.
But here's the situation.
Yes.
The guy who runs the Comedy Cellar
Sure.
got into some flack for it. So did Louis C.K. for not even talking about it, not acknowledging it, not apologizing or whatever.
Well, one, I don't know that he didn't acknowledge it.
Well,
I read that.
apparently he didn't, according to the initial reporting in the initial appearance.
I mean, I know what I read in the paper, but I also know what I heard on the streets.
Okay.
And of course, if I'm a comic, we know a few eyewitnesses.
It's a slightly different version.
Right.
But either way, the
Either way,
point
what
being,
should be the right way for society to deal with somebody like Louis C.K.? Should he be forever banned from his job, or should he be reprimanded, or should
I
there
think
be...
the question itself is somewhat unanswerable. When you talk about the right way in society to rehabilitate, it's something we've struggled with in the criminal justice system forever.
And we know how rehabilitative that the system is.
Right. So
No, but this is much different because there are shades of gray in this whole area. And there's been a lot of black and white activities since Me Too began. And now people are saying, especially men, there needs to be some kind of parameter that we all know.
It's nascent. It's in its embryonic stages.
So what should he do to come back on stage? Or is he doing the right thing?
Well, that's again, there is no recipe, there is no model that can be put together and say, if he did 1, 2, and 3, everybody will be cool. I don't think it works that way. This is something that we find together as a society, but it's not, I don't know that you can say there's a formula here that makes sense. I'm a believer in restorative justice, in the idea that when transgressions occur, that the parties must participate together to bring themselves to some conclusion. But the truth is, you won't find 100%. You can't say, what's the right way to do this so that everybody will be okay, because they won't.
Yeah, where is the forum to build the consensus?
Right.
You know, I don't see.
We're a society now of reactionary. You know, we've taken on, news has taken on the circadian rhythm of Twitter, as though that, and it's our most emotional form of communication.
Now, John,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to push back on you there.
Please.
We are doing our job here. We're trying to, navigate
Would
a
you-
new normal that has been thrust on the world.
But would you say that there is an overemphasis within many in the mainstream media on Twitter as a reliable arbiter of the emotional state of an issue?
I think less. I think Twitter is having less of an effect on us. But I do think you're right in that every tweet is dissected. And I grapple with the idea of
I would like to see
emotionally.
you grapple.
I'm grappling. Believe me, every night I grapple. I grapple with the issues
I like
versus
it.
versus the hysteria
That's
and
right.
the emotion.
And I
Most
think
definitely.
140 or 280 characters is not a welcome forum for that type of grappling, but it's certainly a seductive forum.
But
for
our
that.
hour-long show is a very welcome forum and a great
Very
forum.
welcome. It's why I never miss it. What time is it on and what day?
Now,
I'm not on Twitter.
Yeah, see, me neither.
that's interesting because
This is
that's
my new
now going to.
movement. Me neither.
So that
No hashtag though, because we're not on Twitter.
you famously walked away from a very, very lucrative career on Comedy Central. People say there was like $50 million left on the table. And what was your issue with fame and fortune and
I don't know
publicity?
if my issue was with fame or fortune, but I do know that after the other side of that was after I left, I didn't think that I would ever work in this capacity again. And I redefined success for myself. I raised some kids. I had a happy life. You know what I mean? So,
Okay, that's really important. Flesh that out. Yes.
having a happy
Yes.
life. I get up in the morning. My days are fairly predictable. Most of the things that I do because I want to, not because I have to. Kids are healthy. No one's mad at me. No one's afraid of anything real. There's nothing palpable to be afraid of. We laugh a lot. I see friends of mine on a fairly regular basis, and it's a happy life.
So I said, you're known for blurring lines between various sides of the coin. You yourself are African American, you're Muslim, you don't talk much about your religion, you're married to a Filipino, you have 3 biracial children. It's a polyglot. I mean, it's a melting pot right there.
Yeah, I guess. But I don't,
You make it sound conscious.
Yeah.
I think, you're.
I
think
love who I
oftentimes
love.
He loves who he loves. But people are defining those lines as though they're not supposed to be blurred. But if you don't define those lines, then he's not blurring. He doesn't. His family is not a blur.
But the last 12 years were.
It's a beautiful unit. I don't. Those lines can be defined by others, but that's not.
But others are.
The lines don't, in a life well lived, I think these lines will mean less and less. Which doesn't mean.
I hope so.
Doesn't mean I'm unaware of the lines, but I'm fortunate enough that I can transcend them on many occasions.
I mean, I started by asking you why here and all that. What is it that you two want to say together to the world today?
I'm glad you asked.
Beyond just
manifesto
lucrative,
is such that-
comedy and all the, What's your manifesto, John?
Again, I think that there is
I'm glad you asked.
a slight misconception. So we started out in comedy together. I've known Dave since he was a 17-year-old young man who came into the Comedy Cellar and just blew us all away with, you don't see people with that just ability and insight at that age. And I think from that moment, I've just always been so respectful and honored to be around him and to listen to him and to talk to him. He's just such a thoughtful and insightful individual.
Thanks,
and
man.
comedy is about, for us, the hang. It's about the hang. It's about getting to a certain point where you go out. When you're starting out, it can be very solitary. And you're on the road and you're in places you don't know, and they're not necessarily tricked out theaters where Queen Victoria has her own box. You're in Walnut Creek and you're staying on the side of a road somewhere. And for me, this has been a wonderful just reconnection to that life I had, but at a much better level and place. And I feel like part of what we do here is just have a really great time together and have a great time with the friends and family that are with us, and communicate with the audiences our things and react with them and interact with them. And it's just it's a wonderful way to spend a week.
I think with one thing John brings, like I've been touring forever. One of the things that's special about touring with him is collectively, I think the crowd listens differently than the average comedy crowd. I think a lot of people see our names on the bill and they come to get like the political word, but it's not even that. It really is just a great comedy show. And I love traveling the world this way because,
Yes.
you know, a lot of people been to Copenhagen, but a lot of people don't know what the crowd in Copenhagen feels like or London feels like. It's a great way to engage a city or a place.
And how is it different? Can you tell me what's different between the crowd in
Well,
New York,
sadly,
Copenhagen, and London?
Because of the internet, sadly, places aren't as diverse as they used to be. Everyone does kind of eat from the same trough now. However, European crowds listen more than they do in America. America, it's not that they don't listen in the States, but you know, we're a raucous bunch. And here they have really good performance etiquette. If they go to see a show, they go
Wildly
to see a
polite.
show.
And that's good.
Wildly.
You know, it's an adjustment. I think we had to get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, do you get
Especially in
as much
Copenhagen and-
feedback?
Well, it's a different. Well, first of all, when we first were performing, it was Copenhagen and it was
Stockholm.
And so we like to think that comedy is somewhat nuanced of language and somewhat precise of language, and that those nuances mean something. And they're taking it in as their second language. And so
Good crowd.
I thought there would be a lag where they would all go on like Google Translate and just be like, oh yeah, that's nice. Like it would have been performing at the UN where everybody just has in the headphones. And then they hear finally in Swedish and go, yeah, son of a bitch, that's funny. But it wasn't. They really took to it very naturally, but there is definitely a sense of they really want to hear you. Like I don't know that in the States we've ever performed somewhere where people are just like, you know, this is exciting for us and we really want to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, American rules of engagement are different.
Slightly
Their
different.
expectation of comedy is different. In America, there's more of a sense that like we are also part of the show. I'm going to throw my 2 cents in and that's going to make it, you know, even better. I've had hecklers many times come up afterwards and go like, I helped you out there, didn't I? And you're like,
Oh, that's the
actually,
worst.
I had some
That's the
things
worst.
planned out. So you didn't really. But I've enjoyed seeing, I'd never really gotten to travel, seeing the lifestyle of like Copenhagen, and I will say this too, it's really interesting, in even a Scandinavian country, they don't blur the lines. They don't have the same divisions in some respects that we have racially or religiously. It's very interesting to
And
see.
that's why when I ask you these questions, I come from a slightly different perspective than in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just said, you know, you like the hang. I assume you mean hanging out.
Yes.
Is that the
Yeah,
hang?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
I like to throw that slang around.
yeah, and I'm going to try to pick it up.
I
you
like
know,
to
so that-
hang when I'm gigging.
Is it the same in journalism? Do you
Yes,
like each
we
other?
like to
Do
hang.
you like-
Yes,
is it
yes, especially on the
camaraderie?
road.
Right.
Especially on the
yes,
road.
it's-
That's a little bit like what you do, but
It's
with
the
bullets and
same,
bombs
but-
and things flying.
Right, and you talk about, you know, your perspective. I'm working on a story about
Yeah, we really
this,
like
or-
it. It's the camaraderie. It's all being on the same
Yeah, shoulder
space,
to shoulder.
same level, shoulder to shoulder,
And being out of your
hanging
comfort zone.
and
a
being
little
out of
bit.
your comfort zone.
Yeah, yeah.
So, are you happy out of your comfort zone since the Daily Show? Do you miss it? Do you wish you were still there, given the Trump era, which you refuse to allow me to
Can we
say?
call this the Little Wayne era? That would make me feel more comfortable.
Now that Carter 5 is out,
Yeah.
we have to call it the Lil Wayne era. it was time for me to leave the show.
I know, but you've said that before.
That was the right choice.
Yeah, that you've
Like-
said before.
Yeah, I'm slightly different than Dave. I waited till I got paid.
But similar.
I went and I'm raising kids and trying to, you know, but also trying to live a more, I think, richer, balanced life. I was really focused on that. I knew it was my last shot. It was something I believed passionately in, but I did it to the best of my ability as far as I could go.
Now I have a question. Did you do stand-up when you were gone?
Very little. Like I would do it on the weekends and stuff, you know, but not a ton, and I miss that.
You mean when you were doing the Daily Show, you didn't
That's
do
right.
stand-up?
No,
Is that
I
what you
was-
asked?
I felt, yeah, is that what you mean?
No, like
No,
even
afterwards.
after you left the show.
Yeah, I
did
thought
you
he
do
meant
no stand-up?
afterwards.
It took me a while. It really ignited the night that Dave was at Radio City, and he had been curating these great shows, and he had Chance the Rapper and Hannibal Buress and John Mayer were on this one show, and I came out because I'd been watching Charlottesville all day, and I came on and I said, Dave, can I just come on, do like 10 or great. And I remembered how much I love that forum and the immediacy of it and the hang of it and being surrounded by your peers.
I gotta say one thing that's very impressive. The fact that he hasn't been doing stand-up and would come back and perform at the level that he has been.
Muscle memory.
It is beyond muscle memory. That's badass.
We've had great shows, and the way that the crowd reacts, it's just been an amazing experience. We've done stuff in Atlanta and Houston, El Paso, and Europe and Iceland.
And you're going to direct again, is that right?
Yeah, I wrote something that I'm going to direct.
Yeah. Do we know what it is?
I don't. I haven't read it. I wrote it, but I haven't read it.
So you haven't. You
I
don't want to tell
Don't
us.
tell me how it ends.
You don't want to tell me what it's
No,
called.
I don't want to.
And you, I just watched A Star Is Born. You're in A Star
Right?
Is Born.
Amazing.
It was
Ridiculous.
amazing.
Made me cry.
Your performance or the film?
The film.
The film.
itself.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, she was supposed to say, I also cried. That's good. That's good.
But I was absolutely staggered by the electricity between Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. You see, an actor trying out being a singer in public for the first time, as far as we know, and a singer trying out to be an actor for the first time, and two at the top of their game trying each other's thing. I thought that was phenomenal.
It was amazing to see up close, man. It was amazing. It's funny, I met Bradley Cooper here in London when he was doing a show on the West End, and I knew he was cooking up something.
Elephant Man.
Yeah, he was doing Elephant Man, and he was working on Star Is Born, unbeknownst to me.
And how did you get the part?
He asked me. I didn't know if it was going to be good. I've never seen any of the other movies, but he just asked. I've only done 2 movies in the last 18 years. One was with Spike, because he just asked me, and one was with Bradley, because he asked me.
Spike was here last night too. I'm telling you, that's the other thing. When you hang with Dave, there is a carnival of talent that comes with it. There was Spike Lee and Janet Jackson and Naomi Campbell, all these people that he has cultivated. He's a great curator of talent. And so I have been very happy to bask in the reflected light of that. Although I also had a visitor, I think it was in Stockholm, it was my kid's 5th grade teacher's sister came, not as accomplished, but still.
Be careful, because she's going to get offended.
She is going to get offended.
Yeah, I would say she's just as accomplished, but in a different way.
I think she knows she's not at Janet Jackson's level. I think she feels that. But that's what's, he can, and I don't know how it happens, but he draws in talents from these various areas, and they come together, and it's like those salons, like those old kind of what you imagine the way it used to be, and it creates a really nice alchemy and a really interesting vibe.
It's funny, I don't do press. I only did this so I could meet you.
See, now you're in the group.
Oh, am I in your
Seriously.
group now? I'd
Yeah.
love to be. John Stewart, Dave Chappelle, thank you so much.
Man,
Really
my
a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Sincerely a pleasure.
Nice to see you.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
John, you know everybody. That's
Yeah.
the other thing. That's the other thing.